What's up, y'all? Sparta here. For this video, I want to do a display report on the Sony Xperia 1 Mark III. Now, the main reason I want to do this is because there are a lot of things that I feel people they hyper focus on when it comes to the display on this phone, and they don't focus enough on when it comes to the display of this phone. And this is also going to touch a little bit into like battery life and stuff like that as well, since the display is going to be one of the main things that is going to be eating up battery on this phone. Thirsty display, you're just gonna have to expect it when it comes to a 4K 120 hertz panel. So let's get into this. Let's talk about brightness first. That's the main thing a lot of people like to talk about and like to criticize Sony for ever since they started putting 4K HDR OLED displays on their phones, right? And I'll say this: the brightness on this display, it's not the best out there, obviously. It's not going to be the brightest that you're going to get. You're definitely going to get a little bit better performance out of something like a S21 Ultra. And I'm not just talking about what the spec sheet says, how high the nittage goes, because everyone knows on phones, if you set it to auto brightness, the display will indeed get brighter beyond the purported nittage that the phone will give you in manual brightness. So, yeah. Let's get into that here real quick. Well. The brightness on this phone is actually pretty good. It's been, despite it being December and me being in Minnesota, it's been fairly sunny out for the past like couple months, and the past month that I've had this phone and I've had it in the sun and all that stuff, having it at max brightness, max manual brightness, not having auto brightness on, I haven't had a single issue with how bright this display gets. Most of the times it tends to be depending on reflective, like things that reflect back from the display that tend to mess with brightness. It was the same thing it's the same issue I had on like an S21 Ultra, where yes, the display is bright, but also depending on how bright your wallpaper is or something, you may or may not be able to see a lot of stuff on your display. But the moment I open something up, like say I open the Southwest Prime app up and I start like using like calling for a shuttle or something like that, I never really had any sort of issues with being able to see on this display. Brightness, it ultimately depends on where you live. And I feel like since it can get fairly bright here in Minnesota, fairly sunny here. It's not drab like something like a Washington, D.C. or something like that. I feel like this display serves me well. It's not as bright as a V60. It's not as bright as a OnePlus 9, not as bright as a S21 Ultra, but it's bright enough, honestly. And if you're going from a 1 Mark II to a 1 Mark III, where I've heard people say that the 1 Mark II doesn't have that bright of a display, I feel like this will serve you well if you decide to go from a 1 Mark II to 1 Mark III. If you go from 1 Mark I to a 1 Mark III, this is a definite upgrade. Definitely, this is going to be an upgrade from that. But brightness aside, I'm giving it like a 7, like usable. 7 to me is usable. It's not the best out there, but it's definitely usable. It's not a deal breaker for me personally. 4K. Let's talk about 4K and the overall usage of it and how I feel about it. And I'll talk about the 120 hertz and all that separately from the 4K. This display, in terms of looks, is fantastic. It's a very crisp, very nice display. Things just feel sharp. Like, it feels like there are times where I put the phone down, right? And sometimes it literally just looks like it's a sticker on top of it's a sticker rather than an actual, like, the screen being on. And it's very nice in terms of that. In terms of what I would say to do with the display when you first get it, I would set it to creator mode. I know a lot of people are used to displays that look very oversaturated, very punchy colors and all that stuff, but I feel the creator mode is downright the best thing that you could have on this phone because it just looks very nice. And when someone is recording, when someone has put out a video that was recorded with a Sony camera, you can tell on this phone. Like you can really tell on this phone because there's no artifacting whatsoever on YouTube videos. YouTube videos are always the worst when it comes to artifacting. And it's just not a thing on this phone, man. It's very crazy. It's crazy when you can tell someone has recorded with a damn Sony camera and when someone hasn't. Like I would advise you to watch someone like a Philip Bloom and watch one of his Sony camera reviews where he actually records the video with the Sony camera that he's talking about. And you'll see exactly what I mean. And I would also advise you to compare it to another phone that doesn't have this kind of display and this display setting, and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. I'm trying to think, what was the video? I think it was his Sony Alpha 4 review, his Sony not Alpha 4, Sony A7 IV review, where there's just there was like his intro was black, right? And I was able to see artifacting on the OnePlus 9, and it just wasn't here whatsoever. Very clean, very clean indeed. Yeah, fantastic in terms of that. The 120 hertz, 240 hertz touch sampling rate. This phone is fast, man. Like this display and this response time is just insane. I really don't have any sort of issues with how fast this phone feels whatsoever. You go into an app, it loads fast. Like you touch something, it has no problem loading. This is something, and you don't feel like you've missed any sort of touches whatsoever. I feel like this phone is definitely one of those phones that is going to be one of the smoothest phones out there, one of the quickest phones out there. And it doesn't feel like the phone is losing track of your touch at all. That is very nice. This is a static 120 hertz display. It's not the variable 120 hertz that we may be getting with the One Mark IV and what we have been getting with things like OnePlus 9, the Samsung Galaxy S21s, phones like that, the iPhone 13, the 13 Pro and Pro Max. It's not going to be that kind of display where it has a variable refresh rate or like an iPad Pro. But I feel like that helps in a lot of ways in making sure the phone actually feels far smoother than a phone that has a variable refresh rate. And you're going to have to deal with that. You're going to have to deal with that battery hit when it comes to having a static refresh rate. But as always, what you can do is if you want to save battery life, go into the display settings and turn off 120 hertz. That's what you can do. And if you're not bothered by it, that's totally fine. You could also still utilize that 120 hertz in gaming if you go into the game enhancer, pick a game, go into the settings, hit game mode, hit custom, and as you guys can see, I have it all maxed out right here, and it'll still run the game at 120 hertz if the game actually does run at 120 hertz. I'm going to do a separate gaming video, honestly, because I feel like this phone is definitely a top contender for a gaming phone out here right now. Not the best in terms of battery life, but there's a way to get around that. And I'll talk about that as well with HS power control. Yeah. The 240 hertz touch sampling rate, like I said, is just very smooth. I really have no issues with it. The overall like look of the display is very nice. The brightness, while again not the best, gets bright enough for me. Totally fine. I really don't have any sort of issues with how bright this display gets. Display is responsive. Display doesn't feel cheap, despite the fact that I also do have a screen protector on here. But the screen protector is very similar to the quality of the screen itself, so that's very nice. This display is for content creators, for content consumers, things like that. If you do nothing but record in 4K, this is a phone that you could actually look back and see 4K. So that's very nice. Very good indeed. I really do like this display a lot. That's all I really got to say, though. Really ain't much. Favorite display on the market for me personally in terms of a lot of things. Not the strongest in terms of, say, brightness, like I said, but overall still good. Let me know in the comment section below what you feel about this. Do you have the One Mark III? Is the brightness good enough for you? Let me know in the comment section. This is Sparta. Thank you guys for watching. Thanks for support. Like the video if you like it. Share with people that are interested in sort of content. And have a wonderful Wednesday night or whatever time of day it is in your area.